It's your Thursday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope everybody out there is having a great day today. Excellent show coming up. Velle E. Neal III, Star Tribune columnist, joins me here in just a few minutes. It's our daily delivery debate. Took a break last week because it was Thanksgiving. This week we're back at it. 3 good topics looking at Wolves over-under win totals revised, although we recorded before last night's game, which we'll get to in a minute. Talked about how often the Gophers football program, or even a program kind of like them, like Lavelle's beloved Illini, should be able to compete for a spot in a 12 or eventually probably a 16-team college football playoff. And we got into which team in this market, which pro team out of the Vikings, Lynx, and Wild is having the most surprising success this season. Obviously, all 3 teams at different stages of the year. The Lynx year is over. Vikings are very much in the middle, towards the end of their regular season at 10-2. The Wild 17-4-4 right now. At certain points lately, they've had the most points or tied for the most points in the entire NHL. So Lavelle and I will get into all of those subjects here in just a little bit. First, though, what did I miss? Like I said at the jump, Wolves played last night in LA, second straight game against a Los Angeles team, this time against the Clippers, this time on the road. Very similar, encouraging result. Just a couple days after walloping the Lakers 109-80, they beat the Clippers 108-80. Very similar scores. Nobody's going to quibble with that. Nobody's going to quibble with exactly how it got done. It's defense again. It's no secret. It's defense. It's got to be defense. That's their identity all of last year. They've got good offensive players, but man, when they're flying around the ball like they have been this season in the last few games, they are a different team, and they just swarmed the Clippers from the start. I watched most of the first half. Julius Randle was red hot in the first quarter. The defense was great. I think they were up like 33-14 or something after one. And then Josh Minot had a great stint off the bench. For all of you enthusiasts for more than a 8-man rotation, it was Minot and the usual 3 off the bench. Still no Rob Dillingham because of the sprained ankle, but a 9-man rotation. And then halftime they're up like 59-30. And I say to everybody on social media, I say, okay, everybody go to bed. You've seen the best of this game. This is a 9:30 tip-off, so it's like 10:30, a little after 10:30 by the time halftime hits. That's my theory on a game like this. They're up by 29. The rest of the game is not meaningless, but it's going to descend pretty quickly into garbage time. Or the Clippers are going to make a run, and it's going to get uncomfortable, and you're not going to want to watch that either. So that's my theory. In a game like this, it's like, okay, go to bed now, get your sleep. You've watched the best part of the game. You don't have to worry about, it's going to be a tight game, a close finish, or if it is, you're not going to want to watch it because you will have said this team was up by 29 at halftime, and now it's 5 points with 3 to play in the fourth quarter. What if they blow this game? I do not want to have this game end at midnight and have watched an epic collapse. So that's my theory on a game like this. You go to bed if it's within reason. You can just kind of trust the process, and of course they finish it off quite easily. I think they're up by like 42 at one point, coasted to the finish. Bunch of the non-regulars get a bunch of run in the fourth quarter. P.J. Dozier, Terrence Shannon Jr., Knicks plays, and of course Luka Garza had I think Luka Garza got into double figures. So some of you were like, listen, I want to see that. This is what I want to see. I don't care that the game is essentially over. Douglas Farmer saying, excuse me, we are on Rudy Gobert triple-double watch. And yeah, I guess technically there was that. He didn't get to double figures in anything, but Rudy Gobert in this game, he might have if he would have played more. Only played 29 minutes. Rudy Gobert finishes with 8 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 steals. and a block shot for good measure. He's a plus 21. It's almost like a old Ricky Rubio stat line where he used to fill it up, flirted with triple doubles, sometimes didn't get there with points, but a very robust stat sheet for Rudy Gobert. Anthony Edwards, again, didn't shoot great, by the way, although 4 of 9 from three-point range. That's a little bit better, but he's only 5 of 14 for the game. He had 16 points, but good to see him make a few threes, see a few of those go down. Julius Randle, a team-high plus 28, by the way, in this game. And yeah, Luka Garza had 10 points in those kind of 8 garbage time minutes. Other people were wanting to watch it. They said, Andrew Tangwall says, that's smart and true, but on the other hand, I'm dreaming of a Terrence Shannon Jr. dunk, so I'm going to stay up. Yeah, you didn't get that. Shannon did not score, I believe. Now, Terrence Shannon tried 2 shots, one of them from three-point range, did not score in this game. Had a couple assists, though, so good for him getting on the stat sheet. PJ Dozier made a 3. And then T-Gage, my old neighbor Tom says Garza heads will be up until dawn. Yeah, one of several Wolves players in double figures in this game. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Wolves players in double figures. Nickeil Alexander-Walker had 8, so did Gobert. So 6 plus those 2 that had 8 each. Nobody with more than 20. That's what Randall had. But again, talked about this yesterday, and Lavelle and I will talk about this in a little bit. Like, defense has to be the identity of this team. And this is 3 straight games where they go 92 against the Clippers in that last previous home game where they beat them 93-92, held on at the end to win that game. Then, of course, the rout of the Lakers to finish that homestand, and then now the rout of the Clippers giving up 80 points in both of those games. Now, can they sustain this? I think the Lakers are going through something right now. They got absolutely hammered by the Heat last night, so let's not get so excited about that outcome. Everybody is handling the Lakers right now. The Clippers didn't have a whole lot of energy. I think they were on a back-to-back as well. So some of this can be schedule, but it definitely seems like they're just generally more cohesive out there. They're supporting each other better, and that's obviously huge for them. They're back on the right side of 500 now at 11-10. Starting to play well at an important time. Like I've said a couple times, the schedule gets tougher. Tomorrow night at Golden State. Sunday night at Golden State. Then they have a few days off. They play the Lakers here next Friday, the 13th. Hopefully nothing too spooky happens then. Then they're at San Antonio. Then that big game against the Knicks on the 19th. Golden State again. Dallas on Christmas Day. The Rockets again. San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Boston. Like, it gets pretty tough for these next 10 games here. If they can play well, if they can match some of this intensity after not having this intensity against maybe some lesser opponents that they slipped up against earlier in the season, maybe there's something they can find here. If it's defense, I think it's got to be defense, and they've showed that at least lately, that they've started to find that kind of identity, flying around, fast break points. They had a huge edge on Wednesday. That's showing you the energy and the defense, the offense coming from the defense. Maybe they're starting to carve out an identity. Maybe they just needed those 20 games that they talked about. They were at 20 games right before this one. They win by 29. Maybe the next 20 are going to be much better. I do not have a lot of confidence, however, that the 20 Big Ten games for the Gophers men's basketball team are going to be very good this season. They opened conference play last night against Michigan State at Williams Arena. Gophers take a brief lead in this game, but lose 90-72. Not really close for most of the game. I should mention, too, in that Wolves-Clippers game, 2 former Gophers played in that game for the Clippers. Amir Coffey and Cam Christie both played in that game. Reminder of some better times for the Gophers. Their roster just not really loaded with talent this season. Christie, of course, departed for the NBA. Coffey's long gone, of course, but they just don't have a roster outside of Dawson Garcia that you can really imagine building a whole lot around. Maybe they will carve out a defensive identity. They did not have that in this game. They had it more during non-conference play, but they again dropped a few games in the non-conference and made a lot of work out of some games against mid-major teams that they probably should have handled more easily. So Indiana is next. You got 20 games this season in the Big Ten. It's going to be rugged. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard to see them winning more than a handful of games with this roster. I'm ready to be proved wrong in this case, but I just don't feel like I will be by the time the season ends. Quickly, too, the Frost. PWHL Minnesota Frost got their first win of the season, a rematch of last year's Walter Cup finals. They beat Boston 2-1. So good for them after losing, I believe, their opener at home the other day. I think that was an overtime loss, so they get on the board and get their first win of the season. First win as the Frost, of course. They did not have a nickname a year ago. We'll be tracking them periodically throughout the season to see how this one goes. But the fan support is there. The quality is there. Year 2, can you sustain kind of some of the enthusiasm that you carry over from the first year after winning a championship in your very first go-around? Daily delivery debate time. Got Velle E. Neal III with me right now. Velle, how you doing?
I'm doing swell. Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. You're a busy talking guy today. I see a little KFAN logo in the background. That's all right.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's all good. It's everybody's friendly here. It's all good. We know you do little work for them from time to time, but right now let's talk 3 things for the daily delivery debate this week. Number 1 for you, we've got a lot of teams right now in this market that are experiencing or have experienced what I would classify as unscripted or some surprising success. Who among the Lynx, Wild, or Vikings do you consider to be the most surprising? Obviously, you got 2 teams in season right now and one that just finished up their year a month or so ago.
I think I would rank the Wild third on that list. Okay. I know they didn't make the playoffs last year. They have the most points in the NHL at the moment. But the one thing that was going for them going into the season was that they had this young developing core. Brock Faber, Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, to go with Kirill Kaprizov and a couple other guys. So, the arrow wasn't pointing down at all going into the season. What has transpired that's been surprising is how the team has taken a step forward in John Hines' second season. His attention to detail is pretty obvious when you watch him play and play responsible defense in front of Gustafsson. And Gusty's been great. Think about the people who wanted him traded during the offseason. Now, they're lucky that he wasn't traded. And there are some GMs across the league who probably regret not trading for Gustafsson. So I thought they were in position to return to the postseason this year. I didn't see them having the most points in NHL, but I thought they had a good chance of returning to the postseason. I would put the Vikings second. They had a lot of things go wrong last year with Kirk Cousins breaking down and Justin Jefferson being injured. Coming into this year, we knew the defense was going to be good, and that's been just as advertised with Brian Flores at the controls here. Sam Darnold's been the polarizing figure, the guy that no one believed in at the beginning of the year, but he has been above average for them. He had a rough stretch there when he threw 5 picks over a 2 or 3 week span, but then he had games like last week when he stepped up in the fourth quarter and helped them bounce back against the Arizona Cardinals. I know that said, we were expecting the NFC North to be real competitive and the Vikings possibly being third, even fourth in the division. But I still think they were going to be okay at the worst. The Lynx were 19-21 a year ago. Yeah. And their defense was atrocious. I think they gave up an average of 107 points a game.
Per possession, probably. Yeah.
Per possession. That's correct.
100 possessions, yeah. 100 possessions, yeah.
They improved that by 11 this year. Cheryl Reeve did one of her best coaching jobs ever. Nafisha Collier stepped up and became an MVP candidate. The move to liberate Courtney Williams and Alana Smith from Chicago, that train wreck that is Chicago, and bring them here was a stroke of genius for Cheryl. It made the Lynx a team that had been bounced out of the first round in the postseason a year ago, a WNBA Finals participant this year. I don't think anyone saw that coming, even for a team that, you could say they should be better this year because they have a point guard now, Williams, and Alana Smith steady. But no one saw them going to the WNBA Finals. So of those three teams, I would argue that the Lynx would be the most surprising, followed by the Vikings and followed by the Wild.
I'm inclined to agree. I wish I wasn't, because it's fun. It's more fun when I don't. I think if I was going only regular season, and again, these are teams that are at various stages, so it's sometimes the comparison is tough. But I think regular season wise, I'm almost, or maybe just as much. You could talk me into being even more surprised that the Vikings are 10-2 than the Lynx were, one of the three best teams in the WNBA this year, because I did not think the Vikings were going to be any good at all. If you'd have said at the start of the year, what's more likely, the Vikings go 12-5 or 5-12, I would have said absolutely 5-12. Like,
I get that. I get that. I mean, I had them at 7-10 because I just didn't believe in Sam Darnold.
No,
and I wrote my mea culpa last Sunday in the paper.
I saw that. That was good.
And they promptly go out and win their 10th game, which is more than any Star Tribune writer predicted going into the season. So a lot of us had our doubts about the Vikings. And I guess you're right. Regular season, maybe the Vikings. But man, the Lynx had a hell of a regular season, and they rode to the championship game. And maybe we revisit this in February if the Vikings end up rolling to the Super Bowl, and we could say it was more surprising.
I think you're right though that the Lynx, the way the season ended, that they came within a possession, a controversial possession at that, of winning a WNBA title in a year where the over under for them was like 17 wins in a 40-game season. Like, what they did certainly, start to finish, I think elevates them to number one. And I think you're right. I'm surprised by the Wild. I'm glad you brought up Gustafson, because I raised my hand there. I was one of those who was like, what are they doing? They got Wallstead. Let's just turn the page. Let's cut your losses. Let Fleury have one more year. Let him be the savvy veteran that helps Wallstead kind of get acclimated. And, where would they be without Gustafson right now? Obviously, they've been well-balanced. It's not just him, but, man, he's been terrific this year. They would not be the same team if they had indeed made that trade, like you mentioned.
No, not at all. And now Bill Guerin's making cocky trades where, we know we're going to be drafted in the second half of the first round over the next season. So we're going to give a couple of draft picks for this Jurasek guy.
I like it though. I like when GMs, swing for the fences. We liked when, Tim Connolly moved up and took Dillingham, and the draft they had, it would just only if they would ever play those guys. And we'll get to the Wolves in a minute. But I like aggressive moves. Sometimes it bites you. Sometimes you go back and you look and say, wish they wouldn't have done that. But if you liked it at the moment, you can't always go back and judge and say, well, hey, they shouldn't have done that because you don't like the outcome. If you like the spirit of the trade, that should be enough to carry your opinion. Lavelle, number 2. How often do you think the Gophers football team should be a realistic contender? And that doesn't just mean like preseason. That means like with the caliber of play, with what you see on the field for at least the first half of the season as things start to progress, for a 12-team college football playoff. How often should they be a realistic contender for a 12-team college football playoff? And, likely to expand to 16 at some point, which might change your answer too.
Yeah. As someone who roots for University of Illinois Fighting Illini, I asked myself that question too. What are my standards for that team to be competitive and possibly getting a CFP?
Similar programs, I think.
Brett Bielema he's got them. They've won 9 games this year, which I think is awesome. But they're still on the outside. I think they ended up 20th in the CFP rankings. So it's going to take 10 wins, 11 wins to get into that type of conversation. I would like my football team to be a lock to win 8 or 9 games consistently, with the occasional year in which you can get to 10, maybe 11 wins and make things interesting. I think I could be satisfied as a college football fan if my team does it. Now, if I was a Florida Seminole or a Florida Gator or Florida State Seminole or Alabama Crimson Tide, Roll Tider, I may feel differently. But for the Midwest and the Big Ten, and not being Penn State or Ohio State or even Michigan a year ago, I am satisfied with winning 8 or 9 games. And possibly having a year or two when you get 10 or 11 and make things really interesting. So from that standpoint, I guess you could apply that to PJ too. And it's weird because you look at the Gophers and what they finished with 7 or 8 wins.
7-5 right now. Yeah,
7-5. I'd like to see a little bit more. And there's a couple games I'm sure PJ would like to have back. North Carolina game and Iowa game, perhaps. Rutgers.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think PJ underachieved a little bit this year by winning 7. Although I will say this, I predicted 5 going into the season.
Yeah.
But based on what a fan should want, you should want to see your team, if it's not part of the elite upper class of college football programs, you like to see your team, get to 8 or 9 wins and then have a year where everything clicks and you're winning 10 or 11.
So you say occasionally, like, what's the time frame for you? How often is enough for you to just be in the conversation, like realistically in the conversation, and how often do you need to see them get there? Especially if we're talking down the road, like within 5 years, this is going to be a 16-team playoff. That opens it up even a little bit more for an Illinois or a Minnesota. How often do they need to get there, not just contend? I
like to think once every 3 or 4 years, you have one of those years where, you can make things interesting and get into the playoff. Yeah. I can accept that. I'm looking at Bielema. He's about to bring in his 5th recruiting class, I believe. And his recruiting classes have averaged 47th, I think, over those 4-year span. But he's been able to coach these guys up to the point where they won 9 games this year. So it can be done, PJ. It can be done. You have all Big Ten freshmen at center, at safety, and Coy Parrish to build around until someone offers them a bag to go play for somewhere else. Because they might as well change National Letter of Intent Day to National Letter of Current Intent Day for these guys who are signing, knowing that there's no chance in 3 years they're going to still be with the program.
NLI,
and that makes it tougher too.
NLI matters less than NIL these days, it seems, but. For me, maybe the Gophers are a slightly different conversation than Illinois, although Illinois is probably a pretty comparable program. I think the Gophers, especially if it expands to 16 teams, I think you're right about the time frame. I'm saying like every 4 or 5 years, I need them to have a real chance. Like 2019, that was a real chance if it would have been an expanded playoff, right? They won 10 games. If they win one more in the regular season, they're potentially in the conversation for a top 4 spot at that point, but they lose to Iowa, they lose to Wisconsin at the end. They win their bowl game, they go 11-2, but they would have been definitely in the conversation that year for a 12, 16 team playoff, at least until the end. And they might have still gotten there. They need to be in the conversation every 4 or 5 years. They need to get there at least, like, let's talk about like every 8 years. You want them in. You want a team that's asking them to be a top 16 team at the end of the year once every 8 years, I don't think is too heavy of a lift, even in this current era.
I agree. And it's also tougher when because let's face it, the Big Ten's going to have 20 teams sooner or later. Probably about the same time to go to a 16-team playoffs. There's going to be a 20-team league. Will you break it up into 2 10-teamers? Will you break it up into 4 or 5-teamers? Could you have a semifinals before the conference final? I don't know. But they're going to have to figure that out here. Because it's hard to navigate when you have a 20-team league and make headway and get in the upper tier and consider yourself to be one of the best in your conference. So that's just adds another challenge to it all. And then when you bring in teams from the coast, because now we have West Coast teams in the Big Ten, that affects recruiting because now those teams can recruit up the Midwest and say your friends can still watch you on television, your family can still watch you on television. Yeah. So, because we're playing against Michigan and Ohio State, so it's not easy.
No, it is not easy. Last subject for the day: how many games will the Wolves win this year? And I'm going to set the line at 46.5. Over or under 46.5.
That's a tough one, and actually, that's a really good number to pick because we are basically at the quarter pole for the season, right?
As of recording, they're 10-10. They're going to play. They're going to play tonight. We're recording, so when this is live, there'll be one more game in the bag. They'll either be 10-11 or 11-10. But yeah, pretty much half a quarter point.
I would expect this team to play better as the new guys get more acclimated and they work out whatever kinks they need to work out. I think myself, Chip Suhan, and Patrick Royce have all laid out our reasons for why they're not playing well.
Yes.
One or two of those probably need to be applied for them to get things turned around. But I think they'll play better. I don't see them being a 40-win team. I don't know if 50's in play. I like 46.5. I would argue for 45 would be a realistic number for them. 46 is pushing it a little bit, I think. So if I was betting, I would probably say, so that's 35.
So as of
wins.
right now, they'd have to go 37-25 for the rest of the season to hit the over, at least as of what we're talking about right now.
I think they could do it. I think they could do it. If they remain healthy, if Dillingham continues to make progress. Mike Conley's got to pull his head out of his ass and figure out his shooting goals.
Yeah.
That's always when someone's 37 years old, you're always worried about when they're going to hit the wall and how that is going to look. And you hope this is just a blip in the screen for him because the point guard's one of the more vital positions on the floor. I mean, I know they have Anthony Edwards, but he's better off when he's not initiating the offense all the time. That puts the onus on Conley. He's got to get going, not shoot 31% from the field, and be a little more reliable offensive threat. And I think the wins will take care of themselves if that happens.
As I've said, I'm concerned that their two true point guards are 37 and 19. That's not a really great. If you took the average, that'd be great. Like a couple of 28-year-old point guards, that'd be all right. But 37 and 19 might not be the ideal ages. I was looking at some of their underlying numbers today, kind of preparing for this. I think their underlying numbers are a little bit better than what their record has shown, and maybe they've gotten a little bit of a goose from going into this Wednesday night game, two really good defensive performances. The last two, like they held the Clippers to 92, they held the Lakers to 80. So their defensive efficiency in the John Hollinger numbers, they're 7th in the league, and I think they're 16th in offensive efficiency right now. Their true shooting percentage and their effective field goal percentage are better than their offensive efficiency. It's turnovers that are killing them. So if they can cut down on the turnovers and keep up something close to this level of defense, I like their chances. I worry though they're lost in their 10-10 start is they had a lot of fairly easy games that they either kind of struggled to win or lost. And the West is going to be an absolute beast this year. So I'm probably still over 46.5, but not by much. Like if I thought,
I agree.
If I thought low to mid 50s at the start of the year, I'm more like mid 40s to upper 40s at this point, and it's going to be probably right around that number. And they're going to be probably hoping they're a 5 or a 6 seed and not ducking into the play-in at this point. Yeah,
mentality is going to come into play here because how many times did we see them fall behind 15, 18, 20 points in games, then have to come running back in the fourth quarter and just falling short? No such thing as moral victories coming back against Boston. I believe the defensive efficiency has dropped to about 14th or 15th in the league. That's a big drop from number one a year ago. So that's something they've got to get figured out. And it's weird because it wasn't like Karl Anthony Towns was a defensive stalwart when he was here. And he's proving that again with the Knicks because now he's playing center and that's being exposed. But the other parts of this defense have kind of broken down as well. So I don't know if they miss Kyle Anderson that much. I don't know. But they got to come out throwing punches, first of all. And they got to find the Doberman defense that they had a year ago.
Well, and so much of defense is energy and cohesiveness, and they've been lacking those things. Like the offense hasn't been great, but you can mask bad offense sometimes if you're just making shots. You can't mask bad defense if someone's missing an assignment, if someone's feet are a little slow, if someone isn't rotating the way they're supposed to go. Like you have to be all five on the same page on defense for it to work. And I think they're getting better there, but it's still charitably called a work in progress, I think, at this point.
You also play defense with this.
With the heart?
Play defense with this. And there's been people in the NBA who have been bone on bone with no cartilage in their knees, able to be functional on defense. That goes back 30, 40 years. So there's things they need to work out.
There are. And they've certainly talked him through. The Ant presser the other day after that that the loss that dropped him to 8-10, that was a real eye opener. I mean, I think they know that things haven't been right. I think they're starting to figure it out, but you got to keep doing it every single night. Otherwise, you're just going to get exposed. The league's too good. The West is too good. You can't take any night off, and you can't take a single thing for granted.
No, you can't.
Awesome, Lavelle. We'll do this again next week. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Great stuff from Lavelle, and the fact that there's even a competition with the Lynx for most surprising success this year should tell you a lot about how surprising the success has been, because I thought they would be a runaway winner of that, because, man, expectations for that team were not very high. Picked to miss the playoffs by some folks. Others thought, 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in there, maybe a 500 team. The over-under was like 17 for a 40-game season. And of course, they had a great year, came, like I said, within a possession, a contested, controversial possession at that, from winning their 5th WNBA title. So the fact that the Vikings, who are 10-2, the Wild, who have had one of the best records in the NHL, are in contention for that right now, for that title, says something about how lucky Minnesota sports fans have been to have this unexpected success in 2024, and we will see if it can carry over to 2025. Let's finish with the cooler quickly. Vikings kicker Will Reichert back at practice this week. They will activate him as long as everything goes well. It really tells you something about this season and how it feels different that they could lose their kicker, their excellent rookie kicker, who had been pretty much making everything until that muscle strain caught up to him. He had to go on injured reserve for 4 weeks and not really miss a beat. Parker Romo comes in, makes 11 of 12 field goals, makes all but one of his extra points. I think he made 18 of his 20 kicks while he was here. They win all 4 games that he kicks. He has to kick 4 field goals against Jacksonville, makes them all in that 12-7 win. That's still a pretty important game on their schedule. So that's how it feels different. Like they're bringing back their kicker now. They didn't miss a beat when they lost their other kicker. Both of these guys had not kicked in an NFL game before this season, and both of them have been terrific. So that is example number, I don't know what, of how this year feels different than what we are used to seeing from the Vikings in their history. That will do it for me today. Speaking of the Vikings and the Wolves, should be a double dose of that on Friday's show. Ben Gessling, Start Tribune Vikings writer, expected to join me to talk about Vikings Falcons on Sunday. He spent some time in Atlanta this week working on a Kirk Cousins story, so I want to hear what he has to say about that. And Chris Hine covers the Wolves for the Star Tribune. I want to have him on for a little bit to kind of talk about their season, where they're at, a little bit of a resurgence here, especially, like I said, off of that win over the Clippers on Wednesday. Chris was there for that. Get some scouting reports from him as well. So that will be coming up on Friday's show. Until then, have a great rest of your Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow.